Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. All right, picture this. Our OP is a trainee cadet on an old oil tanker. The chief officer, CO, comes in, thinks he knows it all, and treats OP like a rookie. Let's see how it ends. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Before I start, everyone needs to have some context. I work on ships as officer. Any merchant ship has 3 departments: deck, engine, and galley, cooking and housekeeping. I, in this incident, belong to deck department. This is the story of my first ship, which I joined as a trainee cadet. On ship, chief officer, the second in command, also holds the position of ship's training officer. Let's start. I was a newbie, and even though I was a good student in my pre-sea training, nothing matters on board vessel. That's why we have to spend 18 months as trainees. I joined this oil tanker in Lagos, Nigeria. Ship was quite an old one, and like any old equipment, it had acquired its own quirks. For example, there was a valve which could not be operated from control room, and crew had installed a hydraulic hand pump at valve's location, which had to be pumped for that valve's operation. Similar issues were there all around the vessel, which meant that longer you spent on that ship, more familiar you'd get with its quirks. I was lucky, as everyone in deck department, including 2 trainee cadets, were old hands, and by my 3rd month I was well aware of ship's quirks. By 6th month, most of these old hands had signed off, including old cadets, and I was now the oldest one in department. That also meant that new crew signed on, latest one being the CO, who had signed on just 2 weeks after new cadets arrived on the vessel. Everyone, read master, aka captain, expected me to familiarize the CO with ship's unique quirks, which I tried, but somehow he thought I was trying to teach him his work. And he took my suggestions as an affront to his rank. And everything he tried to put me down. Even though I was the oldest trainee on board, he would assign me lowest jobs, all so he could teach the 2 new cadets, or so he claimed. I didn't mind that because the last CO with whom I had a great rapport, still have, had already taught me most of the things, and these low-level jobs, clean oil, cleaning control room, paperwork, etc., allowed me to live a chilled life on board. But there were still some critical things that I was supposed to do, master's orders, one of which was making valves ready before operation, loading, discharging, etc. These old hydraulic valves are operated via these thin pipes running from engine room, power pack motor, to valves. These thin pipes have hydraulic oil running through them at humongous pressure. These pipes have pin valves on them, which are basically just screws. Screw down, no oil will pass through them. Screw up, oil will pass through them to cargo valves, which you can then operate from control room. It was my job to screw up those before operation. This job was critical because if you screw up too much, the pressure of hydraulic oil will shoot those screws out like a catapult, and there will be a big oil spill on deck. Additionally, those screws were specialized pieces, as newer vessels don't have that, therefore no spare screws. Not even with company. This was the 2nd operation under this AH of a CO. Before operation, I was going on deck with a screwdriver to prepare all the valves when the CO caught hold of me, shouted at me for no reason, and told me that others needed to learn, and I was the one blocking growth of those new cadets. He ordered me to clean and take inventory of stores. I simply said, "Okay, sir," handed the screwdriver to one of the new cadets, and made my way for some relaxation in storerooms. This was a ship-to-ship operation. Later in the day, we got alongside another ship for discharge operation. I went back to office as ordered, and the CO began operating valves from cargo control room. In no time, there was mayhem on deck. Hydraulic oil everywhere. Oil spill is a big issue for us if it goes in the ocean. Everyone trying to control its flow. Ultimately, engineers had to stop the power pack. And deck crew, even officers, were on deck cleaning up the oil while Knight, apparently the new cadet, literally screwed up too much and 3 screws shot up. They were never found. There were literally fountains of hydraulic oil on deck for some time. Consequences. Ship had to cast off without operation because we didn't have spares, which I had told CO, but he didn't listen, and you can't discharge without controlling valves. It took 48 hours for the screws to be fabricated and transported to ship. Ultimately, operation was completed with a delay of more than 80 hours, resulting in massive loss for owners, charters, angry master, and screwed up CO. Similar incidents happened quite a lot with that CO, from a kaput copier to wrong cargo readings. Anyway, I signed off a month later as my contract was up. Later on, I found that was the last sailing that CO in the company. Sounds like you put the screws to him via malicious compliance. Good for you. You didn't want to get screwed over after all. And our second story. Karen thinks I work at the grocery store and spits on me. So this happened about 3 years ago when I went grocery shopping. Obviously, I had my mask on and was also wearing those medical/scientific blue latex gloves. I was picking up some food when I saw this woman that wasn't wearing a mask. At first, I was just like, whatever, stay away from her and move on with your life. But then she started coughing and sneezing, so I got worried for the older clients. I'm a young adult, and some people in the store were in their mid-60s and even 70s. I wasn't sure if I should report her, and I didn't want any trouble, but then an employee went into the aisle, and I just pointed her to the lady. She went and talked to her, and the lady got really mad, saying that I lied and she was going to get me, not the real employee, fired. She started screaming about how I was a snitch and a effing B-word for wrongly getting her in trouble. And since I'm pretty introverted and shy, aka really not good with confrontation, I just kind of teared up and apologized, saying that I just want the others to be safe given the current pandemic, and that I also didn't work there. She continued to cuss and yell at me while calling me a liar, saying I didn't work there. She said her proof of me working in the store was that I was inspecting the items and scanning them with my phone. Granted, I was scanning items, but it was with an app that helps you see if an item is healthy. It's called Yuka. The employee and I were simply trying to get her to calm down and just put her mask on, and the employee said that if she didn't stop disturbing the others and didn't put her mask on, she'd call the manager and get her kicked out. The woman threw a fit, walked up to me yelling about how I ruined her day by calling her out. She was still coughing, spit on my shoes, and left the store, leaving her cart behind and yelling that she would get me fired one day. I was pretty shook from the whole situation, and I froze. The employee was so nice to me, though. She gave me disinfectant and Kleenexes to clean my shoes. She helped me finish my shopping and gave me a free chocolate bar. We need more people like her in this world. If you're reading this, kind employee, you know who you are. I want to thank you again for being such a nice human being. To add to Karen's misery, you should have charged her with assault for spitting on you. And our last story. I had the president, vice president, and 2 other directors voted out by the community after exposing them. I joined my HOA in January of 2022, and it sucked. First red flag was miscommunication. Before I even joined the board, I was given 3 different answers as to where to get my parking decal from. I could tell there was a lack of organization. Another red flag before I joined the board was when the president asked me to stop filming the board meetings in case anyone there did not want to be filmed. I had to cite our state's laws that said I was allowed to film or record even secretly if I wanted to. That's when I knew I had to join the board if the president didn't even know the laws. The red flags continued even when I was on the board. First, the president would barely call any meetings despite how many issues we had to deal with. With the second month, the president and the property management had authorized the purchase of a $10,000 golf cart for our maintenance worker without consulting the board. I was appointed as treasurer, and I didn't even know about it until afterwards. It had turned out he had the previous treasurer from the year before sign off on it. When confronted, he claimed ignorance, and we set up a new system for approvals on expenses like this. Red flags kept coming. Our president kept asking us to vote on issues via email. 2 of the directors and the vice president would just vote, but another director and I constantly reminded them that we were supposed to vote in open meetings, not in email, and would cite the law to them. They didn't care. So we had to threaten going to our local governance that enforces HOA law. That's when the divide began between the corrupt majority and the ethical minority. It got worse. Once we got our audit back from the CPA, which also came late due to our property manager's reluctance to hand over financial documents, it had turned out 3 of our buildings were in a budget deficit and the reserves were not being funded timely, both against the law. On top of this, our property management company hadn't brought us a budget for the 2022 year without any reason. Once the audit was brought up, our community manager from the property management company quit too, another red flag. I ended up having to write a default notice to the property management company for not meeting their contractual obligations. The president was reluctant to send it, but the majority wanted it done. The property management company finally produced a budget 8 months late, but in full color, and it was still incomplete and didn't explain the share common expenses in detail and sending other building budgets to every building. The corrupt majority of the board ended up approving this budget, while again, the other director and I disapproved on record. Not only did we end up paying for the color copies of the budget, we paid an extra $5,000 in special assessments to make up for the late budget since expenses had risen for 2022. And then an extra monthly assessment for the buildings that were working in deficits. The other ethical director I was working with resigned from the board eventually. He couldn't take it anymore since he thought he could get the majority on the ethical law-abiding train. Again, I was appointed treasurer back in December of 2021 for the 2022 year. Part of the default notice was that I wasn't given access to the invoice room to approve of any expenses until October of 2022. Once I did get access to the invoice room, I found all kinds of expenses that didn't make sense. For example, why were we paying $250 a month for telephone lines to the elevators that had call forwarding, voicemail, 3-way calling like they were business lines? The final red flag that let me know I had to find a way to get the corrupt majority off, I found multiple bids to replace these telephone lines and only have to pay $45 a month for emergency telephone lines instead of $250. I emailed the rest of the board about having a meeting to approve of this. I emailed them every day about it for 4 days, and they ignored my email every day. Finally, I said, I feel I have no choice. I have to show the residents that you are ignoring me, even when I'm trying to help all of us save money. A director finally responded, we don't want to work with you. It was time to replace them. I kept track of every red flag to build a case against them and eventually exposed it to the community to get them voted out since they refused to resign. Now we're saving our neighborhood and revamping the financial situation we're in. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.